The sea is a strange teacher. It doesn't raise its voice, but it demands your full attention. In the 17th century, the ocean was vast, dangerous, and deeply alluring. Entire lives were shaped by the horizon, by what lay beyond it, and by the hope or fear that drove men to chase it. For some, the sea meant escape. For others, it was the only path left when the land could give no more. The docks were alive with voices, foreign tongues blending with the cries of gulls and the rhythmic pounding of waves against barnacled pilings. Sailors with sun-leathered skin hauled ropes and barrels, while officers barked orders with clipped precision. Smoke curled from tavern chimneys nearby, and the scent of salt and pitch filled every breath. Each ship had its own rhythm, its own rituals. Merchant galleons sailed heavy with cargo, spices, tobacco, textiles, destined for markets an ocean away. Naval frigates bristled with cannon, built for battle and conquest. Some ships flew no flag at all, gliding silently in search of prey. Others bore the mark of empire. Stepping aboard was not simply a change in scenery, it was a change in life. From that first creaking footstep on the gangplank, the world became smaller. A wooden deck, a mast above, the sea on all sides. Days would be ruled by bells, shifts, and shouted commands. Nights would be filled with stars and uncertainty. And yet, for all its risks, the sea held a strange allure. It offered a kind of freedom found nowhere else. Out there, beyond sight of land, a man could become something else. A sailor, a pirate, a ghost. The horizon was more than distance. It was destiny. Life at sea wasn't filled with glory. It was filled with chores. Aboard a 17th century ship, days began not with the sun, but with the ship's bell. Time wasn't measured by clocks. It was counted in watches. 4-hour shifts passed from man to man. A sailor's schedule danced to the rhythm of wind and waves, broken by moments of labor, meals, and rest. Mornings might start with scrubbing the deck, a task known as holy stoning. On hands and knees, sailors rubbed sandstone across the wooden planks, keeping the deck clean, both to prevent rot and to please the officers. There was little dignity in it, but aboard ship, everyone pulled their weight. Each man had his assigned duties. Some hauled lines and trimmed sails. Others manned the helm or stood lookout in the crow's nest, squinting into the distance for ships, storms, or land. Younger boys, the powder monkeys, scurried through the gun decks, learning fast how to survive among hardened men. Meals were basic and barely warm, hardtack biscuits, salted meat, dried peas, and sometimes a bit of cheese. Water quickly turned foul in barrels, so sailors often drank small beer or watered-down rum, just enough to quench the thirst without dulling the senses. There were no kitchens, just a galley fire enclosed in bricks, swaying dangerously with the ship's movement. Hammocks swung below deck in the dim light of oil lanterns. The air was thick, stale with sweat, tar, and damp wood. Privacy didn't exist. Noise was constant. The creaking of timbers, the slap of waves, the occasional snore or curse. Sleep came in stolen fragments. Still, amidst the labor and discomfort, there was a kind of rhythm to ship life. Sailors told stories, sang sea shanties, carved scrimshaw, and played dice games when the weather allowed. Camaraderie formed through shared hardship. Each man relied on the others. A mistake in a storm could mean death, not just for one, but for all. Above them, the sails snapped and the stars wheeled overhead. Below, the deep kept its secrets. It was a hard life. But to the men who lived it, the sea became home. The sea could be calm, almost kind until it wasn't. For 17th century sailors, nature was the greatest and most unpredictable threat. Storms didn't come with warnings. They came with wind, howling, savage, and waves that rose like mountains. One moment, blue skies and steady sails. The next, a black wall on the horizon, moving fast. When the call rang out, storm coming, all hands scrambled. Sailors climbed the rigging, slick with rain and salt, to reef the sails. Others tied down loose barrels, secured cannons, and battened hatches. The ship groaned under pressure, timber flexing with every surge. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating soaked, shouting men clinging to ropes in a world gone white with spray. A single rogue wave could smash the deck. A poorly secured line could whip a man overboard, lost in seconds. And if a mast snapped, the vessel might founder. No lifeboats, no rescue, only cold, endless sea. But storms weren't the only peril. Fog rolled in thick and silent, blinding even the sharpest lookout. It could hide rocks, reefs, or enemy ships lying in wait. Without stars or sun, navigation turned to guesswork. A small mistake could run a ship aground on an unseen shore, breaking it apart like kindling. There were places sailors feared to name, whirlpools off distant coasts, strange lights in the water, seas where the wind simply died and left ships stranded for weeks in a dead calm. Sailors watched the sky for omens, blood-red sunsets, rings around the moon, flocks of birds veering inland. But the greatest terror, whispered on moonless nights, was being becalmed. No wind meant no movement. The sails hung limp, the sea like glass. Days passed in silence, supplies dwindling, tempers flaring, the sun baked the deck like a griddle. Men went mad with thirst, some prayed for storms, others for death. Yet for all its fury, the sea was never cruel for cruelty's sake. It was vast, ancient, indifferent. It tested, but it did not explain. Sailors learned to fear it, yes, but also to respect it, because to sail across it was to accept a bargain, your courage in exchange for your fate. And the sea always collected. Not every danger at sea came from the storms. Many came slowly, quietly from within. Far from land, with no doctors aboard and no medicine beyond herbs and hope, even small wounds could turn deadly. A splinter from the deck might fester into infection. A fall from the rigging could shatter bones beyond repair, but it was disease that haunted the lower decks. Scurvy, the sailor's curse, crept in after weeks without fresh food. First, gums bled, teeth loosened, legs swelled and bruised without cause. Then came the weakness, bone deep and inescapable. Entire crews were known to waste away, all for lack of something as simple as citrus. Dysentery spread like fire in crowded quarters, turning the lower deck into a place of moans and foul stench. Rats were everywhere. They gnawed through rope, spoiled food stores, and carried their own plagues. Lice and fleas lived in every blanket, every shirt. Hygiene was nearly impossible. If a man became too ill to work, he might be given rum or simply left to lie in his hammock and fade. There were no hospitals, no quiet places, only the heaving deck, the dark corners, and the unblinking sea, and yet they endured. Some captains kept lemon or vinegar on board, crude attempts to ward off scurvy. Herbal poultices were pressed into wounds, friends nursed friends, sharing their rations or helping them above deck to breathe fresher air. Superstitions grew strong in the face of helplessness, charms tied to the mast, prayers whispered to forgotten saints. But there were darker measures too. If sickness threatened the whole ship, the sick might be isolated, or worse, cast overboard to protect the rest. Death was common, but burials were not what most imagined. There were no coffins at sea. The dead were sewn into their hammocks, a cannonball tied to their feet. A few words might be spoken, then silence, as the body slipped beneath the waves. Despite all this, sailors laughed when they could. They sang to keep spirits high, told stories to fight off fear. Life at sea was brutal, but to survive it was to prove something unspoken. To live another day on that endless blue was a kind of quiet victory. After months at sea, the cry of "Land ho!" or brought a surge of feeling that words could barely hold. To see the green edge of a distant coast after endless waves and sky was like waking from a long dream. The sails would be trimmed, the crew gathered, eyes squinting toward shore. Some cheered, others fell silent. A few wept. But landfall was not always joy. For some, it meant profit. Merchant ships unloaded spices, silks, and sugar into bustling ports. Coin exchanged hands, shipmasters gave men their pay, what was left of it after fees, debts, and losses. For others, it meant violence, pirate raids, military skirmishes, slave trading. Harbors were places of commerce, but also of power and pain. And still others simply longed for home. A sailor returning to his village after a year at sea might find nothing as he left it. Loved ones gone, children grown, letters never delivered, the land moved on without him, and for some, land no longer felt like home at all. The sea had changed them, its sounds, its rhythm, it lived in their bones. Many went back to it. They signed on for another voyage, another master, another gamble, because once a man had seen the open horizon and felt the wind driving him forward, it was hard to stay still. The land, with its stillness and certainty, felt too small. Some never returned at all. Their names were spoken for a time in taverns and at hearths, then faded like mist, lost to storms, to sickness, to the great gray unknown. Their stories survived only in fragments, carved into dock posts, whispered in songs, remembered in half-truths. And yet, for every man lost, another step forward. A boy with wide eyes, a thief seeking escape, a dreamer chasing something he couldn't name. The cycle continued, drawn ever forward by wind and water, by hunger and hope. Because in the end, the sea was never just a place, it was a promise, of danger, yes, but also of something more, a test of will, a taste of freedom, a journey without end.
If you enjoyed this voyage through the high seas of the 17th century, consider joining us here at Gods and Gladiators by subscribing for more journeys into ancient worlds and forgotten tales. A like goes a long way in helping us reach more curious minds. And if you'd like to keep exploring, just click the video on your screen for your next adventure. You'll also find links in the description below to more stories of myth, history, and the extraordinary lives that shaped them.